How's it going, guys? And welcome to the showdown between the Tomb Kings, led by Grandpa KHATEP, and the Beastmen, who are going to be led by the Chaos Cow. So let's jump right into this match, guys, and have some fun. So in the front line, I do have a relatively elite Tomb King core. In total, I do have two groups of the Tomb Guard right here, so one here and one on the far side, and then in the middle, I do have the Kepra Guard. So I like these guys quite a bit. I feel like with 47 weapon strength, 38 melee attack, and actually decent melee defense for like a high DPS unit, they make a pretty solid addition, and if I'm not mistaken, they do regenerate, so pretty much the Tomb King equivalent of the Stearnsman. So I decided to get a more elite front line with a little bit higher melee defense and more sustainability rather than going with skeleton warriors and kind of those Nehakar warriors, simply because I have a lot in the back line I really want to protect. So I do have two groups of Ushabti Great Bows, which I think are just pretty much good in every matchup. So we're going to be having the Ushabti Great Bows kind of shooting at some of these, he has Minotaurs over here. And on top of that, they're pretty good at counter-firing against Centaurs with throwing axes, who are probably one of the best answers the Beastman has to the Tomb Kings. So we do have two groups of these guys right here. And then also we have Grandpa KHATEP on his Roomba. So Ark in the Black, I still think is obviously the most competitive choice, but Grand Hierophant KHATEP, he's not bad. With the casket, or the Roomba as we call it here, you do get the Covenant of Power, I think. So it's not as good as the buff that the Iroh Titan has. The Iroh Titan actually increases your Winds of Magic reserves as well as your recharge rate. This one just gives you reserves, so over the long game, it's still pretty effective. And the Roomba is definitely pretty threatening. If you just kind of have him sit here and just shoot at, Bestigor herds, and even shooting against like cav units, like Centaurs with throwing axes, is pretty effective. So we're going to have him here. We're going to be dropping vortexes and some pretty sick beats. So we got KHATEP, just to have one thing to really help me win the front line engagement. I do have a Khemrian War Sphinx, which are incredibly solid units. The Necro Sphinx is good in this matchup. I mean, it's good against like Gorbals and like large threats like Centaurs coming in, but honestly, the Khemrian War Sphinx is just so powerful in the infantry engagement, and it does shoot missiles from its back, so it has a little bit of a counter-skirmishing capabilities, and it's definitely ready to party. In the back, I got a couple groups of skeleton spears and just extra skeleton warriors just to buffer. So if I do buckle in the front line, because Beastmen have very heavy shock damage. I mean, they have decent charge bonuses on most of their infantry. The best scores have 35. These gore herds have 28 compared to like, what are mine, like 8. So there can be some shock. So just in case my front line does buckle and collapse somewhere, I wanted to have some extra troops. And last but not least, I do have three groups of Carrion, which I think are essential in this matchup. Carrion are very good at chasing down Centaurs. They actually have 40 weapon strength and 46 melee defense. I mean, really good combat stats. So what I'd like to do is just kind of get the fight going in the front, use the Carrion to just chase these Centaurs, and even if the Centaurs engage them, it's going to take them a while to kill the Carrion. So I think it's definitely a very solid choice to bring like at least 3 or 4 of these in this matchup. So for my opponent, he does have a couple of groups of Centaurs with throwing axes, pretty much a must pick in this matchup. You really need them to take out the constructs. He has 2 on the other side as well, so 4 in total. And for his front line, he has a combination of Bestigor herds, no, just one Bestigor herd right here, and a bunch of low tier troops, because you can see he did invest in Minotaurs with great weapons, which can potentially do a ton of damage against constructs if they can get on them. But if they get mucked up in skeletons, they're super ineffective. So a lot of this kind of outcome of this game is really going to come down to how much work he's able to do with those guys. He has the Chaos Cow here, always a solid choice, and then he does also have a Bray Shaman with the Lore of Wild, and it looks like he does have the Traderkin and the Vile Tide, both of which will be very good against my infantry. So without further ado, guys, let's get this show on the road. So right now you can see he's going to be kind of collapsing from all angles, so he has the Centaurs coming around the far side, so I just get my Skeleton Spears to kind of screen them out, and then I do grab all 3 of my Carrion here, and I just decide to send him on these Centaurs and just chase them. So I don't mind if he wastes his ammunition on the Carrion. I mean, the Carrion are faster. I think they have 100 speed to the 95, so they will catch them and eventually do some kind of annoying work here, and you can see, look at him just waddling through the snow. It's so ridiculous. So on the far side, just continuing to use my skeletons. I have one group of skeleton warriors with the shields. They actually have silver shields, which is pretty good. And I get my other group of skeleton spears to kind of screen right here. So right now I'm just shooting in my Ushabti Great Bows, just doing as much damage as I can to the Minotaurs. And you can see I've already taken out a couple models here, which is really rough. And the Roomba coming in conjunction with this Khemrian War Sphinx, and they're just going to do a ton of work here. So man, you're such a happy puppy, just jumping in here. And the Kepra Guard, I mean, they have a charge bonus of 8, but you might as well charge them anyway. So the frontline engagement's underway, and I was very happy that he didn't have a lot of Bestigors, because Bestigors smashed the Tomb King's front line. So I really just had to worry about holding the middle. So I send in the Khemrian War Sphinx as well as my Kepra Guard here, just to kind of isolate the deal with the biggest threat in the battlefield. In the meantime, in the back, I'm using my Skeleton Warriors and Spears to fend off the Centaurs here, just doing my best to screen them. So they're trying to get around me, but every time they try to go around, I just kind of refill those areas. On the far side, you can see the Carrion are still just chasing these guys and trolling them. On the far side, it looks like he's able to kill one group of Carrion, which is pretty much inevitable, but those guys aren't doing work right now. And this entire time, there's like a big fight going on. The Minotaurs are taking damage. This is a very, very important point in the battle. I do get a Vortex over here with Grandpa KHATEP, and it's able to wreck some of these Ungor Spearman herds, and I also do get the Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance to kind of buff up my front line a little bit. But the Minotaurs have gotten into the cookie jar, so well played my opponent, kind of forcing through here, and he gets on my Khemrian War Sphinx. You can see Morkers getting in there, and man, he just monster mashed my front line, and it wasn't actually that bad. The best score herds took some substantial damage. The Minotaurs with great weapons got pushed back as well. But my backline is a little bit compromised. So that's why I think with the Tomb Kings, if you're going to play with kind of a Grandpa KHATEP build with Ushabti Great Bows, it's very, very important to have reserves. Because your front line will inevitably collapse and you run into some problems. So you need to be ready for that. So on the far side here, you can see my Ungor Spears are going to, kind of be, not my Ungor Spears, his Ungor Spears are going to be kind of coming out here to tie up my skeletons. And he's probably going to be pushing around with these Centaurs here in a moment. Over here, the Carrion and the Forest are still trolling those guys. So I have two groups of Carrion on this one group of Centaurs, and you can see I might actually be able to kill them because they can't really get away from the Carrion very easily. So this is just it, with kind of the Monster Mash fight, but this is a good situation. Skeleton Warriors and the kind of low tier chaff fighting Minotaurs, which is exactly what you want. Their defensive stats aren't that great, and you can see the Minotaurs are actually going down like pretty fast, even just against Skeleton Warriors and some Spears and things like that. So I am able to get Grandpa KHATEP and his firing squad back, so the Ushabti Great Bows pulling back to the hill with Grandpa KHATEP, and I think I was using the Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance, which is basically like a little bit of a stronger version of Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, but it's very good against units like Vestigors. And you can see I do have my artillery back online, and it does some solid damage, it's no joke. So my opponent has also gotten some Centaurs with throwing axes back into the fight, so very well played there, and he's going to be using Traderkin to kind of slow down this big blob of troops, allow some of his Minotaurs to get on the Khemrian War Sphinx, and the throwing axe is definitely doing some work. So I did try the Vortex right here, wanted to see how it would do, but it's like a Banishment. I find that it even does a lot of damage against Cav, but this one did a little bit. It only took out one model, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. So right now, if we take an overarching look at the battlefield, the Bounce Bar is still pretty even. I think he did get his Chaos Spawn summon. I'm not sure if they might have just died really quick against some of these Spears. I'm not sure what really happened to them, but he does have the Chaos Cow. He also has some throwing axes over here, who I'm just shooting with my Ushabti Great Bows. I realize that if I can kill the Centaurs with throwing axes, he's not really going to have a whole lot left to deal with my constructs and my Ushabti. But it looks like here comes the Chaos Summon here, so that pulls the Bounce Power back towards the middle. So these guys are going to run in here, and that's one of the things. When the Tomb Kings do lose their chaff and their infantry, it's it definitely is a lot easier to kill the constructs, because constructs you can usually stand on top of skeletons, and they're so hard to take down when they have like supporting fodder units. So the Great Bow's just shooting in here, just trying to rout off these Centaurs with throwing axes. He does get another group here who's throwing some axes in, and it looks like he's just trying to take out the Khemrian War Sphinx, which is a good idea because it could potentially just like mass terror out the rest of his troops and really allow me to just kind of have freedom here. In the back, these guys do a little bit of harass against the Ushabti, but I do have Grandpa KHATEP here, and regular Ushabti are strong in melee. I mean, not regular, but the Great Bow variant. I mean, they still have 28 melee attack, 40 melee defense right now, and then they also do have 65 weapon strength. So they can definitely beat up Centaurs with throwing axes in melee very, very easily. So it looks like the Chaos Spawn are chasing down my Khemrian War Sphinx. I do pop the Jajov's Incantation of the Cursed Blade to give them some weapon damage and also trigger the kind of the Soul's Healing, because I still do have some infantry fighting. So I have some Tomb Guard over here. The Kepler Guard are just absolute pimps this game. You can see not a lot of kills, but they're fighting Minotaurs and just holding and just fighting just tooth and nail here. So I do get my Ushabti summoned in the back. So the Ushabti are fighting some Minotaurs with great weapons, which isn't the best, but I just figured this was, I had some troops fighting here. I wanted to support them, see how much damage I could do, and you can see they're still chopping down Minotaurs, and they actually do shatter them there, which is very, very solid stuff. So this one group of Minos is going to be running for the hills, and I think the Minotaur threats are pretty much off the battlefield. Balance of Power, I think, is a little bit in my favor. It's hard to tell, but again, once the Chaos Spawn go away, it's definitely going to, be a boon for me. So my Khemrian War Sphinx is still waddling around, just trying to look for infantry to rout, because I don't want it to be fighting like lords and powerful heroes, since it's really low. So the Angry Tomb King Puppy is going to be going after these gore herds, and he does shatter those guys, which is nice. But if we look here, he's got some spears, and let's see what other shenanigans he has. So this was a big mistake. I forgot about my Carrion. Like, I assumed they died because I saw that one group die, but thankfully I will have them in the fourth quarter to pull in and really help, because I saw the bounce power. I was like, well, this like is, the bounce power is my favorite, but it doesn't look as good as it feels. Like, the Centaurs with throwing axes over here are still chipping away at me. Morker's in really good health, which is always scary. I mean, it's going to take forever to kill Morker with these guys. And Grandpa KHATEP is not a duelist in melee. He cannot finish people off. He's like an artillery lord, support lord. I mean, he's rocking 20 melee defense and I guess he has 350 weapon strength. Isn't terrible. So my summoned Ushabti are just chasing down some troops. You can see most of the Beastmen forces in the backside are just kind of routing here. My opponent, continuing to just be persistent, just chipping away at my Khemrian War Sphinx. So I was just trying to get the Sphinx over here to deal with these Vestigors. But you can see KHATEP still just being useful in the fourth quarter here, just shooting into these Vestigor herds. We only have 17 leadership, so I could potentially rout them off, which would be very powerful. The Khemrian War Sphinx still taking some throwing axes, down to -6 leadership, so that was definitely tough because I really needed that. I mean, the bounce power is my favor, but it's not enough that this game is in the bag. And you can see, man, KHATEP doing some work, though, with that Roomba. I mean, he's up to 122 kills, which, I mean, against the Beastmen is decent. They do have a lot of chaff and things like that, but that's a pretty decent little kill count there. So the Khemrian War Sphinx is going to be chasing down the Ungor Spears, just using it to terror out and just deal with any of the chaff. Because, like, one group of annoying Spearman units fighting against my Ushapti Great Bows is going to, like, be very, very kind of it's going to be tough. They're not going to be shooting their arrows. They'll be taking axes from these guys. Morker will be beating on them, but he gets a great charge right here on the Khemrian War Sphinx, taking it down to -32 leadership and some sort of foul witchcraft. It looks like Traitorkin, which does apply a slow debuff, is pretty, definitely some cool stuff. And it looks like he's charging into my Great Bows, but Grandpa KHATEP does get the Usirian's Incantation of Vengeance, so that's going to be slowing them, doing some pretty decent HP damage, and now the Carrion are back. But you can see the bounce power actually goes back towards the middle a little bit, so man, this game is just completely up in the air. But the Carrion easily going to be able to finish these guys off as they do shatter here. Khemrian War Sphinx rocking 29 HP. It gets its final charge into those Bestigors. And he was like running with a few infantry here, so I tried to get a Vortex, hoping it would go, and look, it's like, oh, it's chasing into those Ungor Spearmen herds, so they're getting torn to shreds by Grandpa KHATEP's Haggard Vortex here. So man, just getting in there, and this fight is just too close to call, guys. So right now it's basically KHATEP and a couple of these Ushapti Great Bows versus some Carrion too. And Carrion, man, that 51 melee defense right now is just saving me, because I'm pretty sure KHATEP does have Thy Will Be Done, so it gives like 5 melee attack and 5 melee defense, so it's actually making these Carrion into like decent combatants. So they're just surrounding Morker here. In the meantime, I'm grabbing my Ushapti Great Bows. I'm just going to be shooting everything I have into this Bray Shaman, because he could potentially get another spell off that, could change the tide of the battle, but I mean, his spells are more anti-infantry based. It's not going to like do much to my Lord, but I was like a little bit nervous because he could potentially cycle charge KHATEP, but the Ushapti Great Bows are able to pick him off, and at this point it's basically just Morker. So what I do is I send in some Ushapti here to fight for a minute, let the other group kind of just pick off the Beastmen troops that could potentially come back, and I think that's pretty much going to be it. Morker is surrounded and the Carrion are chipping him down, but the Ushapti should be able to finish him off, especially with KHATEP. So I pull these guys back thinking that if my Ushapti do lose, I can then shoot him with KHATEP as well as those Great Bows there, but that's it. It looks like Morker does break to armory losses. So what an incredibly crazy game. We got to see Minotaurs, we got to see some Centaurs with throwing axes, and just all kinds of stuff going on. So just a disclaimer, before the game, my opponent did say he was trying something new, so he was probably just trying out an experimental build with Minotaurs. Personally, I think the more optimal way to play that is just to get Bestigor herds in the front line, just go heavy, just monster mash in the front, because if you crush the skeletons in the Tomb Guard and then the Bestigors are like chasing the Ushapti Great Bows and you have the Centaurs pressuring them at the same time, I think that's a little bit more powerful, and also some Centaurs with great opens are pretty useful in the backline. But it was cool seeing, someone try something new with the Minotaurs, but I really think that Ushapti Great Bow fire is just too punishing to those guys, and they just kind of get picked apart. But there are some matchups. I think Minotaurs with great opens are pretty good, like the Chaos matchup. Chaos, does have, Marauder Horsemen with their throwing axes, but it's not as punishing as like a 255 range Great Bow unit. But yeah, I think this build is pretty decent. I still think a more optimal build would be Arc in the Black. You could drop Fated Bune on Bestigors on these guys. You can be healing with your constructs with the Tomb Blades. It brings a lot more to the table, but what's cool about KHATEP is like you can, start sieging right away. Vortexes are very good against low leadership factions with kind of a, just low tier infantry, I guess. And, he brings a lot of utility to the table and lets you cast a lot of cool spells, and just a fun Lord in general, and also forces your opponent to come to you, so you get to really dictate the positioning of the battle and just get the maximum value out of those Ushapti Great Bows. And for his build, I liked it quite a bit. It was cool. Again, he was clearly probably experimenting with these Minotaurs. I do think it's a little bit more optimal to go just like Monster Mash infantry line and then try and kill the constructs when they're isolated with the Centaurs. But yeah, and also if you do have like Centaurs and Poison Warhounds, like you're able to kill the Carrion as soon as they land on the throwing axes, so they're able to fight a little bit more effectively. But Minotaurs could potentially work. Like, had I gone with a build with like, let's say, Tomb Scorpions, or like, because a lot of people against Beastmen will bring like 2 or 3 Tomb Scorpions, a Khemrian War Sphinx. Minotaurs with great opens could potentially really just trash can Tomb Scorpions. I think so. The game could have gone in a different direction had I gone with a more traditional Tomb Kings build. So very well played to my opponent, ODM Shidoku. Look forward to running into you again on ladder, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this Grandpa KHATEP build. Have an excellent night, guys, and take care.